Sometimes the tunnel is extremely long, arduous. The darkness nearly swallowed me whole. My story is one of hope. God can save everyone at any level of pain. This is a quote from today's guest. Stay tuned to hear the entire story. Well, hi friends, welcome to the Everlasting Love Program. I'm your host, Barbara Karpuzian, and as always, I am so glad that you decided to join us. I wanted to read a passage of scripture that comes from Jeremiah 31:3, and it says, "The Lord had appeared of old unto me, saying, Yea, I have loved you with an everlasting love. Therefore, with loving kindness have I drawn you." So I want to introduce my guest today. Her name is Eileish Gillick. What a neat name, Eileish. And I bet you'll tell us like what that means. But welcome to the program. We're looking forward to hearing your story of transformation. So, without further ado, Eileish.
Thank you for having me, Barbara.
Yes.
It's nice to be here. It's nice to have an opportunity to share, even though it's involved a lot of darkness, it involves a lot of hope as well.
Okay.
And I never thought I'd be really in one piece being able to speak on this stuff, so I'm grateful.
Okay.
Eileish is Gaelic for Elizabeth, and the name means my God is abundance.
Yes.
And that's pretty fitting because anywhere else I really looked for healing or truth or light, comes up short.
Okay.
Gillick is my biological last name, but Shetsky is my legal last name because my dad was adopted, which my family did not know until we took DNA tests back when we were still in touch, which we no longer are.
Okay. So what is that last name then?
Shetsky is Ukrainian Jewish, which reflects, Bernard Shetsky was my grandfather, not biologically related. He owned women's shoe stores in Chicago. My grandmother, who on my dad's side was from Germany, as well as my dad was born in Germany. They met in Germany, and her mother she owned a brothel in Germany, and they escaped Nazis that way.
Wow.
She was 100% Ashkenazi Jew, my great grandma. So it's in the bloodline.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. I went to a high school that was primarily Jewish, but I wasn't raised Jewish. So it's interesting to see the Jew by faith and somewhat faith. They don't believe in Jesus, but it was sort of interesting to learn later on. All the Jewish holidays off, lots of random Mondays and such.
Okay. So you're kind of like a Messianic Jew because you are a Jew that believes in Jesus. Yeah.
Jews for Jesus, that's a thing, right?
Yeah, that is a thing. It's a good thing. So Eileish, I just want to get into your story, and for those of you who are watching, you better not turn the dial or fast forward or whatever you do to view this show, because it's a really intense story, but it is a story of God's everlasting love. So why don't you talk about your childhood and what you went through with your siblings?
So really just to not sugarcoat, because I think there are a lot of people that can relate to just raw pain in some form and abuse in some form. But my earliest memory is my dad beating the crap out of my older sister. He had her arm pulled up back and she was on the ground, and he was kicking her and screaming at her to get up, and she was looking at him searching for, trying to obey him, and she couldn't get up, and she was stumbling, and it was pretty horrific. I could have been maybe 3 years old. My sister is roughly 2.5 years older. And so my mom is the breadwinner in the family, and she would go to work, all day, every day, and then come home and be in bed or in a chair, like cemented to it, and in front of a television screen, and we could be bouncing around her, but there would be no direct communication or support from her. She always seemed distracted. She always seemed preoccupied, on the telephone, whatever it was. I am thankful that she worked and provided, because we did not have a lot of money growing up. When people ask me where I'm from, it's a bit of a complicated question to answer, because we lived in 2 apartments before we had a 1-bedroom house that was shared between 5 people. So we had a garden apartment in Glencoe and some apartment in Evanston, near where I live now, actually, which is kind of interesting and nostalgic in a weird way. And then a 1-bedroom house in Deerfield that they later had a addition put onto it when I was 8 years old. And that age is significant, and I'll speak more on that later. So my aunt's family kept her children away from my grandma, my mom's mom, because of their upbringing and what they believed about it, or what their experience was with it. But I loved my grandparents on my mom's side, and my memories with them were the happiest in my childhood. They gave me the only sense of normalcy I experienced from adults growing up. My dad's sleep schedule was, he would go to bed at 4 a.m. in the morning and sleep till 4 p.m. and then wake up just angry, full of rage, and just whatever was closest in his path would receive the brunt of it. And I really had no idea why. He would get angry at the craziest things. He would tell my sister and I to stop laughing, and we couldn't, then it would sort of instigate our laughter further, and he would scream louder and louder, stop laughing, stop laughing. So we were stifled as children. We were not allowed to act like children. I was doing the family's chores by the time I was 4 years old. I was changing my younger brother's diapers. I was doing laundry. I was doing dishes.
At 4?
At 4, yeah.
Wow, I'm trying to picture that.
Yeah.
Because I have grandkids, and I'm like trying to picture that.
It's pretty interesting. My mom told me later in life, she said, you could have run a household by the time you were 3. I don't know if that was some manipulation and some truth to it. Okay. And I've actually done some research, psychological research, and children are surprisingly capable by the age of 3. So I was forced to grow up pretty early.
Yeah.
I will just say that. Yeah, I didn't really have much of a choice. Yeah.
So you talk about violence, and you gave the scenario with your sister, but what did that look like in your home? So
all of us received it, the 3 of us. My mom did not get beat, and I think it's because she made all the money, and my dad has said to me, don't bite the hand that feeds. They used to have arguments when they shared a bedroom that would be, I remember sitting outside the door, and it would be screaming and like a tornado hit. Just, we would look in the room after, and like the bed was flipped over, and it was just torn to pieces, the room. And we were too young to really know what was going on, because they always acted normal to our face. They never really argued in front of an open door, so it was hard to put the pieces together. But my dad would not allow me to have friends, which was pretty strange growing up. Random things, my siblings and I would argue, or we would be having too much fun or whatever. And I just remember different instances, playing in the mud outside, And then, wanting to, hosing off and coming back inside. And my sister was like, no, go get muddy again, to my brother and I. And so she was her older sister. We listened to her, came back in muddy, and we got the bathtub all muddy. And then my dad takes me downstairs and is, screaming at me this close to my face. That was his specialty, and spitting and shoving me into the couch, and then pulling me up again and shoving me into the couch. And that sort of thing is pretty freaking terrifying when you're a baby, essentially.
Yeah.
I don't think he just had no control over himself or his anger. And I still couldn't tell you where that anger comes from. I've learned that anger is an addiction, and that makes sense. Sort of when you get yourself going, it sort of feeds this feeling of control and power. I mean, I've learned that my dad is a sociopath.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and the Bible says, be angry, but sin not. And so, there could be a righteous anger, but this is definitely not that. And so there were 3 siblings then?
Yeah, I was in the middle.
All of you were dealing with this?
All of us to some extent. I saw my sister get hurt. I was getting hurt. My younger brother, he came 4 years later, and it didn't really come out for him until he started doing drugs when he was a bit older.
Okay.
And like a teenager, I saw my brother's like now 6 feet tall. He grew taller than my dad pretty quick. And my dad ran up behind him. It was dark outside, and he ran up behind him and just shoved him from behind. He fell flat on his face outside on the grass.
Wow.
Just crazy. You never knew which direction my dad was going to go with his anger. When I was 15, he was angry because I slammed a door on my way out the door to try to go to school. And he chased me, and he had his knees on my elbows holding my arms down, and he was punching me with closed fists across the face. And he screamed at me, "I wish you were never born," and threw me out of the house. I was getting thrown out of the house all the time.
And your mother just was not present in any of this?
Enabler.
Really?
Yeah, she was there. She saw that happen and did nothing.
Wow.
Yeah, we would go to school with bruises, and my mom would call off Child Protective Services.
Okay. So I was going to ask you, what did schooling look like for you during this time, right?
It was a disaster.
Yeah, elementary, then high school, and how were you able to, pretty much navigate all of that?
Well, I don't remember a large portion of elementary school, most of elementary school, and I'll explain that later. High school, my first 2 years, I almost failed out. I got into drugs pretty young, and I went at them very hard. It was the only sort of pleasure and escapism that I had felt. That happening when I was 15 was really significant. And for whatever reason, I had health issues from the time I was younger. And I know now why, but my mom, we would laugh about it. I had over 200 partial or full excused absences my sophomore year. So towards the end of my sophomore year of high school, I asked my mom if I could go to rehab. I asked her, and she said yes. So I went to rehab, and I started in Alcoholics Anonymous when I was 16. And I stayed sober throughout the rest of high school and entered into DePaul University with like a 2.5 GPA. Okay. I pulled it together, and I am actually the only one of my 3 siblings to graduate proper from high school.
Well, and you sitting here right now, and I know you haven't even shared the whole story, it's obvious that even in the midst of all of that, God's hand was still on your life. I suppose, we could ask the question later, were you asking God, like, why did all of this happen? So you experienced this in high school, in elementary school, and now what in your home, what was was there any nurturing at all? Was there food on the table? What did that even look like in your home?
So my parents would laugh together about how they were traumatized by family dinners, and I don't know what that means. They were forced to eat things that they didn't want to eat, typical childlike complaints, but you figure by the time they're in their 40s that they would have grown out of that.
Okay.
Like, psychological research proves that family dinners raises healthier kids.
Yeah.
So it was fast food at odd hours or nothing at all.
Okay.
I remember trying to clean my parents' cabinets once, and the amount of bugs I found in the flour and in just, who knows how long some of that stuff was there.
Okay.
I remember I still have trouble with spaghetti and marinara sauce because I would eat raw spaghetti with moldy marinara sauce and like Parmesan cheese that was probably moldy
raw,
too.
like it wasn't cooked?
Like uncooked pasta and moldy moldy sauce and moldy Parmesan powdered cheese, because who knows how long it was in the fridge.
Wow.
There was never any food.
Wow.
So fast food is what I grew up eating. I still have an aversion to it today.
So
Taco Bell, McDonald's,
okay.
Wendy's.
Because I guess I'm thinking, how did they avert the child family services? Like, how were they able to get around that?
It's a good question. It's because of my mom being a liar.
They didn't come in to inspect. They didn't.
Not to my knowledge, not to my memory.
Okay, all right.
It was a little different, I guess, in the 90s than it is
Okay.
now. Now, it's a little bit more strict.
Okay.
People take things a little more seriously today,
Okay, so you think that could have been
I remember
the reason.
always being blamed as having just personal issues in high school.
Okay.
No one ever looked at home.
Okay, no one advocated for you
No.
at all. Okay.
No.
Wow. So you talk about not being able to remember much of what happened during your childhood. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
So there is a significant blank spot between pretty much the entirety of elementary school, not remembering what teachers I had, what I did. I distinctly remember being at the eye doctor when I was 8 years old and me being diagnosed as legally blind in my left eye, and it not being the case before I was 8 years old. And fast forward many years to being on my own. I left school. I left home when I went to college, essentially. I mean, after the age of 14, I was basically never home because the times when I was home, I would be getting abused.
So where were you? Where would you go?
So for 2 years, from 14 to 16, I lived with an older friend at her parents' house that was, problematic, but lesser so than mine. So
Okay.
nobody asked questions.
And your parents didn't care that you were there?
No.
Okay.
They acted later like they did and tried to place blame on me as being a bad influence to my siblings,
Okay.
who went their own way with drugs.
Okay.
My dad started smoking pot when I was 14, and it was started supplying and buying liquor and the house became like a party house. There would be freshmen in high school getting high on all
Really?
types of things in the house, yeah. And my mom would come in and pretend to be surprised and then just laugh it off. And my mom's never done drugs before, she says.
Okay. So this was going on in your home. And where do your grandparents fit into this now?
Everyone was kept at arm's length. Everyone was lied to.
It's amazing how they could mask all of this.
It is amazing. It amazes me still to this day. Because until I was 14, my dad was really crazy religious.
Oh, really?
Yeah, not allowing me to have friends, not allowing us to watch pretty much anything on TV, even as far as American Idol. Weren't allowed to watch. Weren't allowed to celebrate holidays. No Halloween. All stuff like that.
So he was religious.
Yeah, he was just basically, he used it as an excuse to be in control.
So you went to church?
We went to church.
Huh.
And I don't remember paying much attention.
Okay, so you don't even remember what that
I just
looked
remember
like.
the force. I remember being forced, and I remember Sunday was my least favorite day of the week because he would be angry, so angry at trying to get us there.
Okay.
And you know what I mean? Just any sort of attitude. We could be laughing. We could be upset. It didn't matter. He was angry. So.
Okay.
Just having to be in an environment with him in the car, you know, and all that was just miserable. Yeah.
But did it come out at all? Like even at church, nobody was aware of anything. Nobody noticed anything.
It was a pretty big church, and I can't remember doing any sort of activities with the church being involved in a deeper way. Like we would just go and then go home.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of an oxymoron here, right? He was religious but angry. And so he
told my mom he knew the Bible like the back of his hand, and he's a liar because I read the Bible. And I think he manipulated my mom into marrying him in the first place. They met through a paper application matchmaker, which is pretty wild. You don't really see that anymore.
Okay.
And they were matched up, and they only spoke on the phone, did not exchange photos, did not spend any time together. The first time they met in person, they got engaged. And so you can say and pretend to be anything you want over the phone. Or on paper, you know. You do not know who a person is until you spend physical time with them and see how they behave. Okay. So I think my mom was manipulated. You know, I don't think my mom would have turned out the way she did if she wasn't already like so invested, you know.
Okay. Well, and there's 3 of you, so we're 3 siblings, 3 children.
It was clear from the very beginning that he was not a healthy man. Okay. He was homeless when he married my mom. Okay. He sold his car and he bought her an outfit and a train ticket and proposed to her right on the spot. But she's purchased her own rings and everything. He has nothing. He's penniless, toothless.
Okay. Wow.
Without her.
Wow. Yeah. And so your grandparents provided a little bit of a respite for you.
Yes, I would have sleepovers with my grandparents. They would send my sister and my brother to my aunt's house, my mom's younger sister, and they would send me to my grandparents. So it was kind of interesting. I had more personal time with my grandparents than the rest of my siblings did. Okay. They did that to say it was less of an overwhelm, but it's kind of interesting that my aunt kept her kids away from my grandparents, you know, but they were, I see them more as my parents. My grandma had a much larger hand in raising me, and my grandfather.
So talk then about the physical and psychological, emotional impact that this has had on your life. You tell us what you want us to hear.
So I was beyond depressed from as early as I can remember, and I was questioning everything. And there was this parking garage rooftop at the end of the block on the house that we lived in, and I would just lay on it and think about bigger things that kids my age probably weren't thinking about yet. A lot of whys and learning, you know, more. I was really isolated socially, so I didn't really know how unusual my experience was until much later in life. Mm-hmm. You know, I was manipulated and brainwashed into thinking this is a normal dynamic of a family when it was so far from it. Mm-hmm. My dad claimed he survived abuse, but told me later his dad never hit him. And so I really don't understand. I think it's his own failures, his own aggression, anger at life built up, you know what I mean? But he's never had to have a job. It's like, what are you so stressed out about? I don't know, but I was so depressed, and I sought out drugs, and then I got off drugs, and I thought I was doing okay. But the first time I visited my family after moving away, none of them so much as said hi to me. Once I left, it was like I never heard from them again. And that was pretty typical, actually. You know, thinking back, my mom never called me. She never checked in. I could be gone for so long, and she would never say anything to me.
Really?
It would always be me reaching out to her. Yeah, it was like she just didn't care what happened to me. And I had been through some significant traumas by the time I was 16, like being raped very brutally, you know, getting myself into situations with these drugs and not having anybody looking after me, you know. So by pomp and circumstance, that's kind of what happens in those situations. And it's not like I had anybody teaching me that. It's not like I knew better. It's not like I could have done anything differently.
You sustained a brain injury at some point.
I did. I was 8 years old. So I've been on and off sober throughout my adulthood. And in 2014, I was in Colorado, in the Denver area. It was a 3-night concert camping experience with just one band, Fish, from the 80s. I don't know if you've heard of them. And I met these two guys, and they were, so one of them just kind of beelined for me. Like, I saw him in the corner of my eye, and just this gorgeous man is walking towards me. And you know, you meet people at these events and stuff, and I don't even think we introduced ourselves. We just started talking, and he complimented my tattoo, and he wanted to take a picture of it, and we just sort of hit it off, and spent the rest of the time together, you know, platonically, just as friends. And it turns out that was not the first time that I had met that person, but it would be 6 more years until he came forward with that information, which is pretty fascinating.
Okay, so we're going to talk about that at some point?
Yeah.
Okay.
We can talk about it now. So,
well, but the brain injury,
right,
and then,
that left me permanently blind in my left eye.
Okay. And the brain injury was...
So I learned that I had amnesia, and I started getting more information, seeing a neurologist, seeing specialists, getting, you know, and seeing a neuromuscular therapist, and learning why the left side of my head feels like a mosaic, and then getting imaging and stuff that would prove these situations after I was told the truth.
Okay.
So this has all been pretty recent, within the last 5 years, that I knew what I survived as a kid. So this young man that I thought I met in 2014 was actually he had known me for 20 years already by that point. He wrote me 6 years after the fact. We were distant friends, and I would visit him, and the first time I visited him, it was very strange because he said things that I just sort of shrugged off as being kind of weird, but I explained it away. He took me outdoor rock climbing in Canada, which changed my life. You know, I saw vegetables I've never heard of before, basic things like ginger and, you know, broccolini or whatever. And, but I had never been immersed in nature like that, ever. Okay. And it totally blew me away. But he called me able-bodied. I thought that was kind of strange. I thought maybe because I'm in Illinois and people aren't typically that, I don't know, athletic. Like, I just really didn't know. Yeah. And we slept in a tent together, and he held my head, and when I woke up, his hands were still there, like holding both sides of my head. And I was like, that's so sweet and like so intimate, and like, who is this guy? And there was just so many nuances of the conversation and of his comments that I only put together after I received a letter from him in 2020. So he told me that I thought we met at that camping festival concert deal, but actually he saved my life. He found me in a dumpster on the west side of Chicago, left for dead, when I was 8 years old.
Wow. Is this the homicide thing, or is...
Yes.
Yes.
So after the fact, I had more, things started to fill in a little more, and I would have flashbacks.
So you were 8 years old.
I was 8 years old, and my father... In a dumpster.
Almost dead.
Almost dead. My dad thought I was dead when he threw me in there.
Okay.
They obviously did not want me to survive.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this man found you.
He found me, and he was not a man at the time. He was 10.
Wow.
So, a child himself.
Wow.
And the skin on my skull was exposed to bone. And I must have been in horrific shape, and he's not disclosed all the details to me because it's taken me 5 years since his letter to fully come to terms with everything that I survived. I've had 6 surgeries. 6.
What did he do? Did he go and alert somebody at 10 years old?
So, right. I mean, it was a different time, and he sought help and got me to the hospital, and for all I know, I think that I was medically induced in a coma, but he's withholding information because A, he does not want me to prosecute my parents. B, he wants to protect me from
might be too traumatic.
The extent of the trauma. It's like I've had to just take it piecemeal. You know, if I was told everything all at once, I would have a really hard time. The last time that I ran into him, that I saw Sean, was spontaneous in Washington, because I did live out there for a while because I was so inspired by the beauty that I decided to just leave here, which isn't the right way to do things. Planning is a little better of an idea, but I ran into him and I had a seizure, and he helped me through the seizure and took me to the hospital, and the hospital staff gave me his letter.
So 10 years old, and he remembers. So now, then he sees you at a concert. This is like the next time that he sees you.
Right.
And how old is he at that point?
He would be 24, 25.
Okay, so somehow he remembered.
I'm not sure how he remembered me.
Wow.
Because I was obviously beat up. I mean, maybe the name he remembered. But he saw me from across.
Interesting.
You know, he saw me from a distance and came right up to me.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, I'm not sure how.
Yeah. So do you find this information out, because when do you get the letter? At what point?
2020.
2020. And this was post-concert.
6 years after.
6 years after. And why?
I think he thought I would remember. Like, he warned me before I went out to visit him because he knew I didn't remember him at the concerts and the camping. And so he thought I would, like, and I still didn't. And I know why he was eyeing me so crazy. And I'm like, what is up with this guy?
Okay.
Why is he looking at me like he can see right through me?
Okay.
You know, it was a weird experience.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So he discovers you in a dumpster. You know, now you find out all this information. And I guess I'm wondering, like, you know, how you're internalizing, like what like your internal process, like what's happening, you know, as you're learning some things. And he lives in Washington now, or in Denver, or?
So his dad's from Chicago. He was adopted, and he was adopted out to Seattle.
Okay.
And he went to school at the University of Western Washington, which is in Bellingham, about an hour and a half north. And it's interesting, he studied environmental studies, and he used to lead backpacking trips and stuff. He's awesome and so smart. And when we ran into each other in 2014, he was telling me he was thinking about starting EMT school. And I wonder if I had anything to do with that.
Yeah.
I think I did. And now, 11 years later, he's a paramedic fireman in Bellingham.
Okay. So you're taken to the hospital. What do you remember about that journey?
You know, I've been hospitalized after the fact, and I've had weird flashbacks and like trauma being in a hospital and not understanding where it came from. It's like living in a movie kind of sometimes, because I'll have nightmares or I'll have flashbacks of scenes and it'll go away. And I don't really have control over it. It's like, I don't know if I have amnesia from being hit in the head so hard, or because like my brain is suppressing it. But I've seen and remembered just enough to know that obviously it shows in all of the medical problems that I've had, the injuries that I've had, and the surgical recovery from them. That he's not making things up. But my family took it so far as to continue to lie to me after I handed my mom his letter.
Well, now when you're in the hospital, you're 8. So isn't the hospital looking for guardianship? Were they able to contact your family? I mean,
again, my parents are liars, very good ones.
There was no investigation.
They made something up.
Okay, wow.
They must have been pretty convincing.
Okay, yeah, and you're 8, so you don't really know all of
I don't even know if I was awake.
Okay. So did you go back home after the hospital stay? You went back home?
As far as I'm aware, I went back home.
Okay.
My mom told me that I was attached to her hip from the ages of 8 till about 12, and I'm like, that's interesting, because those are the years that I don't remember. You know, it must have taken that long to recover, 5 years.
Wow.
I remember being at the eye doctor and being diagnosed as legally blind. And I remember patches and glasses and my mom totally ignoring them. Because my eye could have gotten better.
Like you were supposed to be wearing a patch?
Yeah,
and
my eye could have been improved. And
okay.
She told me later that I memorized it with my good eye, and then I thought it was wrong, so I repeated back. She would gaslight me so significantly.
Wow.
She's like a master. My mom's not an idiot. I mean, you have to be some level of not smart to premeditate murder against your own child, but
yeah. I mean, that's how you're seeing this.
Yeah, when I was 12, the only family vacation we've ever been on, we went to Southern California, and my dad's an artist, and we went to art museums, which wasn't really suitable for, kids, and then in a rental car, they drove to where O.J. Simpson most likely killed those 2 people, and they left us 3 in the backseat, and they went and scoped out the scene.
And left you in the car.
Left us in the car.
Wow, so at what point does Jesus come into the picture? Because you see this growing up at home, church and religion, and there's really no connection for you at that time. So when does Jesus come into the picture?
So it was definitely a really long journey for me I was always seeking spiritually, and there's so much stuff out there that you can experiment with and explore and get maybe somewhere with, but AA is all about finding God, and it says of your own understanding, so it's, some people call it spiritual kindergarten. But I was 16 when I was introduced to that, so I believed in God and would talk about God and pray, but it wasn't really in a religious sense or in a Jesus sense. My grandma was always reading Bible verses, singing hymns, and she used to call me and read Bible verses to me whether I liked it or not. And I still remember ones that she would repeat, like, don't worry about what clothes you'll put on, what you're going to eat, things like that. And that's significant to me because I've been homeless. I essentially did not grow up in a stable home. I was kicked out so often that I didn't necessarily know where my next meal or my next place to lay would be. And on some level, maybe my grandma could sense things, She knew things were not good, but I don't think she felt the power to do anything. I don't think she knew how bad it really was. And I really have no idea how my parents were able to cover up something of that magnitude. I really don't. I think they just got lucky.
Lucky?
And Chicago police doesn't really care. I've gone to them with this. They don't care. They don't care. If I was holding a dead body, maybe they would care. But they're so jaded. And one of my spine doctors said he worked in the inner city in a trauma unit, and he's personally pronounced 3 kids dead at the hands of their parents in Chicago. And he said Chicago police officers deal with it every day.
Yeah, wow.
So it's not really, I'm not significant or special in that regard.
Well, you are significant and special to God, so
thank you.
Yeah.
Sean called me special, and that really stuck with me. I've been in a lot of abusive friendships, relationships. There's pretty much not something that somebody's struggling with that I can't relate to, other than post-marital or having kids and stuff like that. That's a whole nother ballgame. But I basically was more mature than my parents. You know what I mean?
So your grandma reads scripture to you, and then when does...
I started going to church on my own in 2015.
Okay.
And the pastor really struck me. I remember being outside the pews, there was the entrance to the pews, and then there was sort of a center room, in the entryway before you go into the service area. And I was too scared to go in, and was just kind of, remember standing, I think I was wearing all black and combat boots, and he comes up to me after the service, and he just pinches my elbow, and he goes, "You're in." And I always remember that.
Wow, what an interesting thing to say.
I just always remember that. It could have been the second or third time that I went, but it changed my life because I had been outcast by, you know what I mean? It's like I never had a place where I was seen, where I mattered, and somebody made me feel seen. And really just the way that he spoke was so convincing, and I saw the prosperity that everybody had in that, it was like brighter on the street where that church was. And ever since then, I've never completely let go of the idea. I've dabbled in a lot of Buddhism, a lot of just other sorts of spiritual thought, books and A Course in Miracles even, but really landed on this. I mean, I started having, I had a meditation once a couple of years ago where I opened my eyes, and it was a character that resembled Jesus that was sitting on my floor. So that was a game changer for me, and I'm not I don't have any sort of, I don't see things and I don't hear things. But that was a pivotal moment for me as well.
Well, there's a New Age meditation, right, that sort of transcends our kind of cognitive sensibilities, if you will. But the Bible talks about meditating on Him, right? And the meditations of our heart, that they would be pleasing to Him. So I think a lot of these other belief systems pull a lot from the Scripture and then twist them or add to them or
Sure.
whatever they do. But when you meditate on the Word, you never lose your cognitive sensibilities, or you're grounded, right? Because the Lord is not, the Lord's not like that, right?
Yeah, I just felt a pull. I felt God didn't want to let me go.
Yeah.
Jesus didn't want to let me go.
Yeah. So what was it that really just kind of finally pulled you in? Because the pastor said you're in. Now you had to make the decision whether or not you wanted to be in and stay in.
Right.
So what?
That was 10 years ago. So I've been in and out since then. And I mean, a church is still a church, and people are still people.
Sure, sure.
I felt very judged. I was the only person who had a lot of tattoos and piercings and a dark past, and I couldn't really relate to people there, and it's about having a relationship with Jesus at the end of the day. And a lot of people that come to church, it doesn't mean that they're really living by the Word.
Yeah.
And so someone gave me a Bible, and I started reading it, and it brought me comfort, and it brought me peace. And even now, I mean, I was baptized last November because I am making the commitment.
Yeah, congratulations.
Something that was also quite convincing was my grandmother, who used to always be all about Jesus. She passed very peacefully from COVID at 90 years old. And she had an open Bible splayed across her chest at the time. I accidentally touched this.
It's okay. Yeah.
And that was...
Wow. An open Bible like this.
Right.
I got to be careful too
nap.
across, right? Wow. Wow.
And God took her home.
Yeah. Wow. Whew. That's powerful.
Right.
Yeah. And powerful that, and you're right. And I think it's good for our audience to hear that, the church is made up of sinners, and sinners that are saved by the grace of God, who are still imperfect. We always say the reason why the church is not perfect is because we're a part of it, right? We're all kind of on this journey to being more like Him, and even Paul said, I die every day. I have to die every day to be more like Him. And so sometimes we have to look past that, and that's why we keep our eyes fixed on Jesus, which you've obviously said, that's what I'm going to do. Yeah, men look at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. And it's shallow because we can, because there could be people running around that are covered from head to toe and look holier than thou. And you can look in the New Testament, and you can see Jesus talking to the Pharisees, even, right, and the Sadducees. But He said, your sepulcher, you're like an open grave. And yeah, so it's not about all of that. And we have to move beyond that, right?
And you never know. I remember this woman telling me, you never have very much on, and I was so broke that I couldn't afford clothes.
There you go.
I was desperate for just more layers.
Yeah.
I wasn't trying to expose myself.
Yeah.
And just the way she assumed, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But from a really early age, I just I knew that I was going to have to develop a mind of my own. And I try to focus on myself even now, you know, stay in my own lane and not think I know what's going on with other people. Other people's spiritual work is their business.
That's right. That's right.
And I still feel life has taken a really long time to change.
Yeah.
You know, from just my mindset to the types of people I attract to external situations, having to support myself from such a young age.
Yes.
And in every way, not just financially. It's taken a tremendous amount of strength that I know was not all my own, because I have wanted to give up so many times, and I've tried. And there's a future and
That's
hope.
right. That's absolutely right. You know, it's interesting because if you look at the lineage of Jesus in the book of Matthew, you'll see there 4 or 5 different women who were in his lineage. You know, one was violated by her family. She was rejected and abandoned. That was Tamar. There was one who was a prostitute. That was Rahab. There was a widow in there. It was Ruth. We had a teenage mom. That was Mary. You know, I might be missing one, or there was Bathsheba, who was an adulteress. And, you know, God's, sometimes it's just, he's so counterintuitive, you know, and I think it's a good message for people to hear. You know, God will take the weak things of the earth, the weak, to confound the wise. And you are going to be able to draw people to him that I couldn't draw, or that somebody else couldn't draw, you know, whether you have a tattoo or a funky earring, or, you know, whatever your style is, you know. And I also believe too that as we grow closer to him, this is for our audience to hear, you know, just like with Paul, he said, you know, things I used to love, I now hate. Things I used to hate, I now love. And so God does that transforming work.
All I want is a peaceful future with a husband.
All right.
And my cat.
And your
and
cat.
his dog. And children someday.
And children,
and I never thought, you know, and I'm 100% sober, and I want to be.
Yes.
You know, the things that I used to excite over repel me now.
Yes, that's so good.
It's interesting.
Yeah. That's like Paul's story, right? The things that he loved, he now hated. And so what do you see in the next year? I know you already said these are some of the things I like, but like what's in the near future for you?
Well, I just had surgery 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
And I had an intrathecal pain pump installed in my body. So I have a remote control, and I have pain medication being dispensed through my body 24/7.
Because
of chronic pain, because of my dad trying to beat me to death.
Okay, yeah.
I suffered from just agony and insomnia like you wouldn't believe over it. I have 13 pieces of titanium holding my lower back and my pelvis together.
Wow.
I've had wrist surgery. I've had a broken collarbone, which I didn't even know it had been broken until recently.
Wow.
It's pretty crazy to discover.
Yeah.
You know, they had to shave bone in my pelvis where it had been broken because I was also sexually assaulted. Joyce Meyer is someone that my grandma listened to a lot of, and she's great. She has great things to say, and she said she was sexually abused by her father, and
till her teens.
Right, for a long time, And she says that he robbed her innocence, but no amount of anger will ever bring it back.
Yes.
You know, no amount of resentment.
Yes. Yeah. And actually her father accepted the Lord in his older age.
Wow.
So there's still hope for.
I've tried with my parents. Even still, I've asked my mom if she would go to church with me. They've completely written me off because they know that they can't lie to me anymore.
Yeah. Well, you just pray for them, right?
Yeah, it's still hard. I won't lie. You know, there are moments where I'm overcome.
Yeah. Yeah.
But by emotion and, you know, I still struggle with seeing God as a domineering, punishing sort of fellow.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and boy, we could keep talking, and
we could all day, but I understand.
Yeah, we're going to pray, but but what you just said is very profound, Eileish, that because you didn't have that model of a dad, and God's, you know, the love of God, as you continue too in your journey with Him, the Father's love will be revealed over and over in your life. I'm gonna close us in prayer. Yeah, in your mind and in your heart. I'm so grateful that you shared the story with us. I know it's not over. I know it's going to be a journey, and I just pray that God will bring the right people into your life, that you stay close to Him. But I just want to pray. We're going to close in prayer. I just pray for all of you who are watching, who've heard the story, and maybe one day Eileish will write the book, that no matter what the circumstances are in your life, whatever has happened in your past, whatever might be happening now, that God is a redeemer, and that's His heart. We live in a sinful world. We live in a fallen world. We have autonomy to make the choices that we make. And as a loving Father, he doesn't force anything on us, but He just says, "Come, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest." And so that's, you know, Eileish and I are here. We're praying that for you. She said she has searched all different kinds of religions, and she has found her comfort in the Comforter. And that's who our God is. He is a comforter. And so just grab a hold of those words and know that God loves you with an everlasting love. It's not a cliche, it's the truth. Try Him and you will see. God bless you.
Not knowing what to say or how to say it, after all the times I've tried, I run away from it. I run away from it. But His amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. His grace, His mercy, His kindness to me. Amazing grace, His amazing, amazing grace. Oh, not knowing what to say, I say the wrong thing, or I hide away